This is Bound by Duty, Torn by Love, written by Beryl Coops.
Bound by Duty, Torn by Love is a tender, slow-burn Scottish romance about healing, found family, and the courage to do what's right when the world calls it wrong. The carriage wheels crunched over the gravel of the drive, a sound like grinding bones. Callum Fraser didn't look out the window. He already knew what waited, the hated outline of Dunbrae House, etched against a Scottish sky the colour of a dull bruise. He had carried that image for 10 years, through Spain's blood-soaked mud and Portugal's fever wards. It had haunted him. Now it was his. So was the title, Laird of Dunbrae. A name he had never wanted, inherited from a father he had never understood, in a place he had fought his youth to escape. The carriage shuddered to a halt. Callum stayed where he was, hands clenched on his knees. The air was thick with dust and the ghost of pipe smoke, and still somehow easier than what waited outside. Out there lay the past. Out there the ghosts kept better time than any regiment. At last he moved. The door groaned. He stepped down onto the gravel he had last trod at 17, furious and fleeing. The thin summer of 1816 did little to warm the stone. Dunbrae was no grand castle, only a sprawling grey manor whose windows stared like sightless eyes. It seemed smaller than he remembered, and far more tired. Weeds choked the beds. A shutter on the west wing hung from a single hinge and tapped an irregular rhythm in the faint breeze. The great oak door opened before he reached it. Mr. Campbell, the butler, stooped now, his face schooled to neutrality, stood with a handful of servants ranged behind him, stiff with a tension Callum could feel from 10 paces. "Captain Fraser," Campbell said, his voice rasped thin with age. "Welcome home." Captain. The word struck like a shot. It was the only skin he knew how to wear. Laird felt foreign, ill-fitting. "Campbell," he said with a curt nod, and went in. The entrance hall was cavernous and cold, scented with beeswax over dust, damp stone, and rooms long shut. His bootsteps cracked the silence. Stern Frasers glowered down from their frames, eyes seeming to track the unworthy air returned in anything but triumph. "The library," Callum said, voice roughened by the journey and disuse. "I'll see it now." Campbell's mask slipped for a heartbeat. "The library, sir. It has been closed since your father passed." "I'm aware. Unlock it." A bow, the shuffle away, the scrape of a heavy iron key. The oak door yielded on protesting hinges, breathing out a cloud of dust that danced in the thin spear of light from the grimy windows. Callum stepped in and stopped. It was a tomb. Furniture lay under sheets like shrouds, dust lay thick on every surface. Books, thousands, stood ranked along the walls, spines cracked and faded, sentries for a world his pragmatic father had seemingly abandoned. A great desk sat under its grey mantle, the empty hearth gaped cold and black. Here was the house's heart, stopped. "Callum, you're here." The voice, smooth cultured, came from the doorway. Lachlan Fraser leaned on the jamb, impeccably dressed, a smile on his lips that never reached his eyes, polished, at ease, clean hands. "Lachlan, we wondered if the solicitor's letters had gone astray," Lachlan said, drifting in and wrinkling his nose at the dust. "A dreadful business. But now you're home, that's what matters. You must lean on me, of course. I've managed as best I could given circumstances." Oil looking for a crack. "I'll manage," Callum said, allowing no argument. Lachlan's smile tightened. Of course, the brave Captain Fraser used to command. He let it hang as if command here were another creature entirely. "We dine at 7. Reverend MacLeod will join us, keen to advise on restoring stability to Dunbrae." He left on silent carpeted steps. Alone again, Callum felt the walls press in, the titles, the debts, the expectations, a weight like a hand on his chest. His breath snagged, a familiar tightness gripped his lungs. The old cacophony surged, cannons roar, men screaming, the whine of shot. He lurched back into the hall, took the stairs 2 at a time, and shut himself in the bedchamber prepared for him. It was as cold and impersonal as the rest. Night fell and deepened. For Callum, silence lied. In the dark, the ghosts were loudest. He woke on the floor, heart battering his ribs like a drum calling a charge. Smoke and blood and falling clung to him. Cold air bit his skin. His right hand burned with a stinging throb. Moonlight poured across broken glass and a dark smear of blood on his knuckles. He sat on the boards and dragged air in and out, harsh and sore-edged. He was home, in his own house, in his own room. And in the terrified hollow of his mind a single question hooked and held, sharp as iron. If I cannot sleep in my own house, whose house is it? Elspeth Grant moved through the world as a shadow. A housemaid's work was to be quiet, efficient, unseen. She polished the wainscoting until it gleamed, lifted ash from the grates without a sound, and folded linens with a care that bordered on reverence. Near the bottom of Dunbrae's hierarchy, she wore a crown in the kingdom of her own mind. After lights out, when the other maids sighed into their pillows, she curled beneath her thin blanket with a stub of candle and a book pilfered from the morning room before it was locked. Her aunt, once a governess, had taught her letters in a whisper. "Words are a different kind of wealth, Elspeth," she'd said. "No one can take them from you." The new master's arrival sent a tremor through the house. Captain Fraser. The whispers shaped him into a spectre, brooding, damaged, haunted by war. They said he had stared at the lined-up staff as if they were a firing squad. Elspeth kept her eyes lowered, but she had seen the tight set of his jaw and the scars on those strong, restless hands. Now Mrs. Campbell, the housekeeper, stood wringing her own. "The master's ordered the library opened. It's a disgrace. Mountains of dust. You'll see to it, Elspeth. You're careful. Quiet." Elspeth's heart leapt. The library. The locked heart of the house. "Yes, Mrs. Campbell," she whispered. Dust lay thick as snowfall. When she lifted the first draped sheet, a grey cloud billowed up, stinging eyes and throat. She worked methodically, uncovering chairs and tables, her mind already cataloguing spines, Austen, Shakespeare, histories, philosophies, treasures on every shelf. At the great desk, her fingers reached to the very back of a drawer and struck cold metal, a small tin box. Inside lay a sheaf of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. The top began, "My dearest Callum, the rain here is a constant drum upon the roof." A father writing to the son who had run. Beneath, newer pages in a sharper hand, a son's letters never sent, anger bleeding through the lines. Under the letters, a child's primer, its cover softened by years. Pressed between its pages, a single harebell, its purple faded to a ghost of blue. A girl's flower, saved, tucked away. The intimacy of the discovery felt like trespass. A glimpse of a soul she had never known in this cold house. A sound behind made her start. She slid the tin back and turned. Captain Fraser filled the doorway. He was not looking at her but through her, eyes wide and unseeing, breath coming short and ragged. He gripped the frame as if bracing for an unseen volley, knuckles white. Panic rose, sharp and clean, then steadied. She recognized the terror. She knew the dark's choke. This was not a captain at a threshold, but a man drowning. She did not flee. She did not use his title. She stepped closer, soft-soled shoes silent on the floor. "Sir," she said in the tone one uses for a spooked horse, "you are in the library, at Dunbrae. The window is to your right, the books to your left, there is a clock on the mantel." His gaze twitched toward her voice. "Listen," she murmured. "The clock. Can you hear it?" Tick-tock, tick-tock, a thin, steady thread. "Breathe in for the tick," she said, drawing a slow breath herself, and out for the tock. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then a shuddering inhale, a ragged exhale, in, out. His eyes began to focus, to see shelves and dust motes, and then her. He looked at her properly for the first time. His breathing, still uneven, tried to match the rhythm she set. Silence held, filled only by the clock and the measured rise and fall of breath. His shoulders eased by degrees. "Again," he rasped. And for the first time in years, Captain Callum Fraser obeyed a voice that was not his own. The library's forced proximity became their odd, dust-soft world. Each morning Callum appeared, dark, restless energy at the threshold, watching as Elspeth sorted, cleaned, and quietly ordered chaos. At first he only observed, posted like a sentry in a doorway, eyes tracking every movement. "It needs a system," Elspeth said one morning, courage steady after the day before. She stood before a teetering stack of ledgers and estate papers. Chronological, or by subject. He blinked, pulled back from wherever his thoughts had gone. "Subject," he said, voice rough. "Tenants together, holdings together, anything to do with the land in one place." It was the first practical thing he'd offered about the estate. He began to help, without orders, with action. He shouldered furniture so she could sweep behind it, lifted stacks she could not, carried armfuls of books with a soldier's efficiency and a surprising gentleness for fragile spines. A shutter slammed in the wind. The sound cracked the room. Callum flinched, every muscle tensing, the book in his hands hitting the floor. Elspeth didn't startle. She set aside her cloth and spoke in that same calm cadence. "It was the wind, sir. The east latch is loose. You're in the library. The desk is behind you. The globe is to your left." He stood very still, breath held. She named the anchors of the room until his fists slowly uncurled. He gave a curt, embarrassed nod and stooped to retrieve the fallen book. Later, over a brief respite, she noticed a fresh cut along his palm, likely from the shattered glass of his first night. She fetched a bowl of rainwater and a clean cloth. He watched her approach, expression guarded. "Your hand, sir," she said. He hesitated, then offered it. His was much larger than hers, scarred, calloused, and shaking only slightly. She cleaned the cut with a touch so light it was almost air, then tied a thin strip of linen around it. The intimacy hummed in the quiet. "There," she murmured, "no one is asking you for orders here." The words hung between them. He looked from the neat bandage to her face. Something in his own, usually set like stone, eased by a fraction. Neither saw the figure in the corridor. Lachlan had come on silent tread and paused just beyond the door. He took in the scene, the captain's bare hand in the maid's, the space between them narrowed to a breath, and let a slow, cold smile touch his lips before he slid back into the hall. The servants' whispers would have new rich fodder. Mr. Phelps, the solicitor from Inverness, smelled of mothballs and importance. He sat in the study, the only other room presently fit for use besides the library, and arranged his papers with fussy precision. Callum took his father's chair and felt like an impostor in it. "The estate's finances are, to be blunt, in a precarious state, Captain Fraser," Phelps began, peering over his spectacles. "In his later years, the late laird was not prudent. There are significant debts. The tenants are in arrears, and the north wing's roof wants immediate repair." Callum listened as the weight mounted. A different kind of siege. No glory, no purpose, only slow decay. "However," Phelps continued, clearing his throat, "there is a clause in the will, a stability clause, if you will." He tapped a paragraph. "The bulk of the capital, the funds needed to restore the estate and provide for its people, lies in trust and is released upon one condition." Callum's gut tightened. What condition? The title holder must be wed, and wed suitably, within 1 year of inheritance. The word suitably landed like a cannonball in the quiet room. Wed. A solution as simple as it was abhorrent, a treaty brokered with a ring rather than a sword. "My father stipulated this?" Callum's voice was flat. "He was most insistent on the continuity and stability of the Fraser line," Phelps said, avoiding his eyes. "To that end he reached an understanding with the late Viscount Kinloss. His daughter, Lady Arabella, is of a suitable age and station. It was hoped an alliance." He didn't need to finish. Lady Arabella Kinloss, polite, strategic, immaculate. The perfect hostess for a crumbling estate. A woman who would expect a composed husband, not a soldier who woke on the floor with bloodied hands. The ghosts crowded close. "We followed you to our deaths, and now you will buy a roof with a marriage?" Guilt pressed until it ached. He thought of the library, of a quiet voice measuring breath, of a corner of the house that had begun, barely, to breathe again. Through the window he could see the overgrown gardens, and beyond them the tenants' cottages whose roofs were now his to keep dry. "If a ring can buy those roofs," he said at last, the words tasting of ash, "who am I to refuse?" Yet even as he spoke, his gaze drifted down the corridor toward the dust-choked library. A house was built of more than stone and timber. It was built of whispers. Elspeth, who knew how to vanish in plain sight, had learned to hear them. In the kitchens, the maids giggled about the captain's brooding handsomeness. In the scullery, older footmen muttered that he was not right, that the war had unsettled his reason. In the alehouse, they said cousin Lachlan was ready to step in, steady where the captain was volatile. Elspeth said nothing. She kept to the library, her sanctuary, and worked. As her cloth skimmed the shelves, she saw a note in the margin of a book on husbandry, written in the old laird's sharp, precise hand. "A library is a lung. If it is closed, the house cannot breathe." She stared. This was not the unfeeling patriarch of legend. This was a man who understood the soul of a home. The sentence turned like a key in an unseen lock. Perhaps father and son were not so different. She began to notice the captain with the same attention she gave the shelves, small things others overlooked. Rain thrumming in the chimney eased his shoulders a fraction. The lemon of polishing soap unknotted the line between his brows. A mended quill and a pot of ink steadied his restless hands. Quietly, on a scrap of paper, she made a list, her hush list, of anchors that seemed to hold him. Ink, lemon soap, rain on stone, the pendulum clock, the feel of rough paper. She was adding to it in the scullery when she saw the little pouch, a heavy, conspicuous bulge on the washstand. Mrs. Campbell caught her glance and pressed her lips thin. "That was left for you, girl," she said, uneasy, "from Mr. Luckland's man. An opportunity, a post in Edinburgh, all expenses paid, for your discretion." The word curdled. It was not opportunity, it was purchase. Leave and be paid. Stay, and Elspeth lifted the pouch. It felt dirty in her hand. On Sunday, returning from Kirk, she slid the whole of it, unopened, into the poor box. She would not be bought. She would not be frightened off. After that, the house seemed to hold its breath. The game, such as it was, had begun. Luckland found her alone in the pantry, counting silver. He moved like smoke, appearing in the doorway and blotting out the light. "Miss Grant," he murmured, all silk. "I understand you declined my gesture of goodwill." Elspeth's heart thudded, but her voice stayed even. "I am content in my position, sir. Are you?" He stepped in, eyes roving over neat rows of pewter. A waste, really. A girl of quiet intelligence, buried in this mausoleum. Edinburgh would suit you. Open libraries, learned societies, chances to better yourself. His words were painted bright. She saw the rot beneath. "My place is here," she said, firmer. The pleasant mask cooled. The smile remained, sharpened. "Loyalty is admirable, when wisely placed. The captain's situation is uncertain. When he falls, those too near are crushed by the rubble." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "My offer stands. Think on it. Discretion is the better part of valour." He left the air colder than he'd found it. Elspeth pressed a palm to the cool stone wall, steadying her breath. He had not threatened her outright, but the menace was plain. Later in the library, the captain was having a bad day. He paced tight circles, agitated, gaze gone far away. The tin of letters lay open. The past had its claws in him. Without thinking, only wanting to anchor him, Elspeth picked up one of the unsent letters from son to father. Anger ran through it like wire, but there were gentler lines too. A foreign sky, a hard beauty. She read those parts aloud, voice low and even. Callum stopped. He listened. When she finished, the silence shifted, softer at the edges. "Jamie," he said, the name torn out of him. James MacTavish, 18, sang off-key. A shuddering breath. At last he named one of the ghosts. The ice around him cracked a fraction. Grief shared made a narrow bridge. A bright giggle sounded from behind a bookcase. They both started. A small dust-smudged face peeked out from behind a stout volume of Scottish history. A little girl, no more than 6, eyes wide with curiosity. Maisie, his ward, his late sister's child. A silent, stuttering shadow in this great house, as unseen as Elspeth herself. Callum looked at the little girl, his niece, and guilt surged, fresh and sharp. Maisie had lived at Dunbrae since her mother's death a year past, another duty he had refused to see. She was a quiet, stuttering shadow in a house of echoes. He knelt, movements awkward. Maisie. She didn't run. She only stared, thumb creeping toward her mouth. "You like books?" Elspeth asked gently, a tiny nod. "So do we," Elspeth said, smiling. "Would you like to stay?" The library gained a third inhabitant. Maisie chose a corner with a picture book and sat small and intent, her presence warming the room without a word. Cook Aggie began sending up a tray with 3 bannocks, still warm from the griddle. In the evenings, faint flute music drifted from the courtyard. Tam, the stable boy, practicing after his chores. One afternoon, a latch on the window worried at the frame, letting in a thin whistle of wind. Callum fetched a small toolbox, set the hinge true, tightened a screw. A simple thing, wood, metal, fit, turn. No orders, no strategy. When the window closed cleanly beneath his hand, a flicker of something rare crossed him, usefulness that did not harm. He watched Elspeth with Maisie, the patience as she sounded out words, the way the stutter eased under her steady cadence. "Breathe for the tick," Elspeth would murmur, finger on the clock's face, and speak on the tock. The girl's shoulders lowered, syllables unknotted. Success brought a shy, astonished smile. Reverend MacLeod came by, worry carving deeper lines at his eyes. "Creditors are restless, Callum. And Lachlan, he's buying ale at the tavern, listening hard, making promises. He purchases loyalty with whispers against you." The siege walls tightened, yet inside the library for a few protected hours each day there was truce, ink on fingers, rain soft in the flue, a child's whisper of triumph over a stubborn word. The room breathed, and for the first time in years it felt like something close to a home. A storm raged outside, rain lashing the library windows. The wind howled down the chimneys like the ghosts that hunted him. Callum sat rigid by the fire, a book forgotten in his lap, every muscle taut. Each crack of thunder struck like a cannon. Elspeth had settled Maisie in a truckle bed in the corner, the child limp with sleep. She saw the sheen of sweat on the captain's brow, the whitened grip on the chair arms. She did not ask if he was well. She knew he wasn't. Instead she began to sing, an old Gaelic lullaby her aunt had taught her, voice low and steady beneath the storm. Talav, talav, mo gaol, mo crithe. Hush, hush, my love, my heart. She drew her chair a little closer, not touching, only present. The clock, sir, she reminded softly as the song ebbed. Tick, tock. His breath snagged, ragged. He tried to match it. In on the tick, out on the tock. She hummed again, a calm thread through the tumult. Slowly, the tension began to drain from him. Fingers uncurled. Shoulders eased. His head tipped forward. His breathing lengthened and deepened. He slept sitting up, the storm still snarling at the windows. Elspeth kept her vigil until the wind lost its teeth and a pale wash of dawn touched the panes. The next day, searching for estate papers, she found a different kind of ledger, his father's personal accounts. In a precise hand, rents were entered. Beside them, small notes. Forgiven, poor harvest. Forgiven, illness. Roof repaired, estate cost. She traced the neat lines with a reverent finger. The old laird had not been cruel. He had been careful and kind. He had loved his son enough to write letters he never sent, and he had loved his people enough to ease what he could. A house, he had understood, was not merely a holding, but a family. She thought of the stability clause. Perhaps it was less a trap of money and station than a clumsy, desperate hope that his son would not live alone with ghosts, that to save the house Callum must build a family of his own. The realization ached, painful and beautiful both. A footman appeared at the door. A visitor, miss. Lady Arabella Kinloss requests a friendly call. The hook was cold and clear. The storm outside had passed. Another one had arrived at the gate. Lady Arabella was everything Elspeth was not. Poised, elegant, a vision in palest blue. She took tea with Callum in the neglected garden, its faded beds throwing her crisp freshness into sharper relief. "My father spoke so highly of yours, Captain Fraser," she said, voice chiming and cool. "An alliance between our families was their dearest wish. It would bring such stability to both our houses." Callum listened, sipping tea brewed too strong. She was polite, intelligent, and entirely transactional. She spoke of Edinburgh's season, committees and charities that required a composed hostess, and the mutual advantages of a union. She praised Lachlan's steady counsel, his keen understanding of modern estate management. Across the lawn, Elspeth oversaw a scatter of village children. With Callum's quiet permission, she had begun a lending corner, a table cleared, a few donated books stacked like treasure. Maisie, shy but smiling, carried a volume with both hands as if it might fly away. Callum's gaze drifted from Arabella's perfect profile to the uncalculated joy on the grass. Arabella followed his line of sight, a faintly approving smile fixed in place. How charitable. It is so important to give the lower orders a sense of purpose. The kindness in her words built a wall between the tea table and the lawn. The invisible collar of expectation tightened at his throat. This was what was required. A cool, correct partnership that would pay the debts, fix the roofs, quiet the creditors. The correct choice. "You must do what is correct, Captain," Arabella said softly, as if confirming a foregone conclusion. Behind her, Lachlan stepped from the house and gave a slight, satisfied nod. The alliance was assembling, whether his heart entered into it or not. The poison seeped out slowly, then all at once. Anonymous handbills appeared on trees and the kirk door, their ink mean and sure. The laird was unfit, prone to violent humours, and guilty of an unseemly fondness for a certain housemaid. Whispers sharpened. Eyes followed Elspeth through corridors that had once felt neutral. The friendly warmth of the kitchen thinned into a room of averted gazes. Mrs. Campbell clicked her tongue. "Nasty lies," she muttered, loyal as ever, but even she could not dam a tide. The worst came after Kirk School. Maisie stumbled home with tears streaking clean tracks through dust. She held up her slate. Scratched in a crude hand were 2 words: Bastard Laird. A cold, contained fury flooded Callum, cleaner than any he had known in battle. He took the slate gently from her and knelt so they were level. "Look at me, Maisie," he said, voice low and steady. "You are a Fraser." He tapped his chest. "Say it." She shook her head, lower lip trembling. "Tap your chest," he guided, soft as a command. "I am a Fraser. I... The stutter locked her jaw. "Breathe," he said, echoing the lesson he had learned at another's hand. "Like the clock. Tick-tock." She breathed. He waited. "I am a Fraser," she whispered, the words breaking through. "Again," he encouraged, eyes warm and unwavering. "I am a Fraser. Clear, strong." He pulled her into a fierce embrace, a vow in his arms as much as in his voice. He would burn the world to keep this child whole, and the woman slandered beside him safe. That night a lamp was reported missing from the West Wing stores. No one thought much of it. Elspeth found Lachlan in his study. She set a slip of paper on his desk, the Kirk's receipt for the opportunity money, unsigned. "I will not be leaving, Mr. Fraser," she said, voice quiet and steady. "My loyalty is to Dunbrae, and to its laird." The suave smile vanished. His gaze went flat and cold. "A profound mistake, girl. You have chosen your side. I hope you can bear the consequences." The threat hung between them like smoke. Elspeth inclined her head, turned and walked out with her heart hammering and her chin high. In deliberate defiance, she and Callum made the library's new purpose public. They announced a reading hour for any tenant or villager who wished to come. The first day only a handful appeared, curiosity barely outweighing caution. But as Elspeth read to the wide-eyed children, and as Callum simply sat among them and listened, something shifted. The fear thinned, smiles flickered, shoulders loosened. What had grown in secret began to root in the open. A line in the dust, plain to all, the heart of the house would be claimed for everyone. Later, as Elspeth was closing up, she noticed a coal scuttle tucked oddly beneath the curtained arch that led toward the disused west wing. She bent to move it and paused. A faint, acrid tang clung to the metal. Oil. Cold dread slid down her spine. She straightened and looked into the dark mouth of the corridor, unease settling over her like a weight. The sound of fire was the sound Elspeth had always imagined in Callum's nightmares, a living roar tearing the quiet apart. Fire! The West Wing! Chaos broke loose. Servants ran with buckets, shouting against the blaze's bellow. Smoke boiled into the main hall, thick and black. Callum was there at once, the captain taking the field. "Line to the well, soak blankets, keep the main door closed, starve the draught." His voice cut through panic, crisp and sure. He scanned the faces crowding the lawn. Cold dread dropped through him. "Where is Maisie?" Cook Aggie's hands flew to her mouth. "She said she left her doll. She ran back in." Elspeth was gone too. He didn't hesitate. He snatched a soaked blanket from a maid, threw it over his head, and plunged into the smoke. Heat hit like a wall. The West Wing was an inferno, flame licking along doorways, greedy and fast. He heard a cough, small, strangled. He followed it up the main stair. Elspeth stood at the top, Maisie clutched tight, the way down cut off by fire. "The window!" he shouted over the roar. In Maisie's room, Elspeth was already tearing bedsheets, hands frantic but sure, knotting lengths with quick, ruthless precision. Callum hauled the bedstead closer and hitched the rope tight around a stout post. The flames licked at the door. "Take her," Elspeth cried, thrusting the rope end toward him. "No, you first. She's lighter. I'll lower her. Go!" No time to argue. He swung out of the window, feet finding the wall, hands burning on wet cloth. "Now!" Elspeth bundled Maisie to the sill and eased her out. The child's weight came into Callum's grip. He bore her against his chest and half slid, half dropped the remaining distance, landing hard on the gravel with Maisie safe in his arms. He thrust her into a waiting pair of hands and looked up. Elspeth was framed in smoke, clambering onto the sill. She set her weight to the sheet, too near the heat. The knot smouldered, then failed. She fell. Callum ran. He caught her as she dropped, the impact slamming them both to the ground. She coughed, choking, eyes wide with panic and ash. He cradled her, breath tearing in his throat. "Breathe," he rasped, smoke raw. "Breathe for me, soldier. In, out." He counted for her, steady, relentless as she had for him. Their faces were streaked with soot and tears. Behind them, Dunbrae burned. From the edge of the crowd, a voice rang out, clear with shock. "Did you see? He carried her out, like a wife!" Dawn rose over ruin. The west wing stood black and skeletal, its stones still steaming where the bucket line had doused the worst. The acrid reek of wet ash clung to every breath. Maisie slept in Cook Aggie's bed, a small fist bunched in Elspeth's sleeve even in dreams. Elspeth was bruised, smoke-rasped, and very much alive. The inquiry began at once. The local magistrate, a friend of Lachlan's, took statements in the study, mouth pinched, questions pointed. The west wing was unstable, of course, Lachlan said, smooth with sympathy. So many forgotten crates in those old rooms, and with the captain's quite understandable distress, perhaps a lamp was left untended. A terrible accident. Tragic. He painted negligence with a careful hand, always distressed, never accusing. Callum said nothing. He stood at the edge of the lawn, gaze fixed on a twist of blackened metal in the churned mud. He crouched and lifted it with 2 fingers. A lamp collar, scorched and warped. Identical to the make kept in the West Wing stores. Identical to the one reported missing from Lachlan's rooms. Lady Arabella arrived as the sun cleared the trees, pale and composed in travelling dress. She took in the ruin, the soot-streaked captain with a child tucked under his arm, the maid at his side. She drew Callum away, voice low. "This is a disaster," she said frankly. "The talk will be vicious, but I can help. My dowry will fund repairs. We can weather this together, if we move at once. Announce the engagement now. It will steady confidence." It was the correct move. Strategic, clean, effective. It would save his house. It might cost him his soul. He looked from Arabella's steady, practical gaze to Elspeth. Soot on her cheek, lashes clumped with smoke, Maisie's small hand still gripping her sleeve. The hook tightened. He had a choice to make. Save the house or save his heart. He chose as a captain chooses. He chose to protect his people, even if the cost was himself. He found Elspeth in the library. The flames had spared it, but the room felt colder than any ruin. "You must go," he said. The words were hollow, scraped clean of the feeling tearing him apart. He held out a small pouch, his own coin, not Lachlan's. "There is a post in Inverness, with a family. They will treat you well. It's arranged." The colour drained from her face. She understood at once. He was sending her away from scandal, from Lachlan, from him. The honourable course, the correct one. The pain of it landed like a blow. She would not beg, she would not make it harder. "I see," she whispered, voice trembling only a little. There were no tender farewells. They stood a few feet apart in the room where they had built a quiet world and let it fall back into silence. "I wish you every happiness, sir," she said, formal words utterly insufficient. He couldn't answer. His jaw locked so hard it ached. He managed only a nod. She turned to go, then paused. From her pocket, she drew the pressed harebell from the primer and the scrap of paper, her hush list. She set them gently on the desk. Then she was gone. He stood where she had left him until the rattle of the coach on the drive faded to nothing. The door creaked. Maisie slipped in, eyes raw from crying. She walked to him and pressed a slate into his hand. In her clumsy child's script, 3 words were scratched deep. Bring her back. The cold fury that had been banked since the fire found its mark. Callum walked into Lachlan's study without knocking and set a twist of scorched metal on the desk with a clatter that made the inkpot jump. "Yours, I believe," he said. Lachlan glanced down. The ruined lamp collar looked small on the polished wood. He lifted a brow, cool as winter. "A common make. It proves nothing." "A footman saw your man, Duncan, in the west wing that night," Callum replied, voice low and even. "He'll swear to it before the magistrate." A ripple, gone as soon as it showed, crossed Lachlan's face. The pleasant mask slid back into place. "The word of a servant against mine?" He smiled without warmth. "You are rattled, cousin. Grief makes men fanciful." Callum leaned in, palms on the desk. Not fanciful, finished. He straightened, the soldier's steadiness settling over him. "I'm done letting you write the tale in whispers." He left the study and sent Tam running with messages up the glen and down to the shore. By noon the great hall was full. Tenants, crofters, tradesmen, kitchen maids with flour still on their sleeves. Faces wary, curious, closed. Callum took no chair. He stood on the step below the dais so he would not look down on them. When he spoke, he did not pitch his voice like a laird, but like a man asking neighbours to hear him out. "You've a right to know the truth," he began. "My father left me an estate in poor repair and a condition in his will I would never have chosen. There are debts. The roofs need mending. I have failed some of you already by not coming sooner." A murmur moved through the room. Surprise at the plainness, the admission. He lifted the scorched collar for all to see. A fire was set in the west wing. A lamp went missing from stores. This collar is the same make as the lamps kept there, and the same make as the lamp missing from Mr. Laughlin's rooms. A footman saw his man in the wing. He will give his word. He let the words rest, unadorned. No accusation shouted, no names spat, only facts laid out like tools on a bench. "I cannot promise you a rich laird," he went on, voice steady. "But I can promise you a fair one. Rents will be just. The worst roofs will be mended first. There will be a schoolroom here, in this house, as soon as it is safe to open the doors. The library will belong to all of us. I will sell plate and horses before I ask more for any family already stretched thin. I won't hide the cost. Keeping my word may cost me this seat. So be it. You are not merely tenants on a ledger. You are Dunbrae. You are its heart." Silence followed, deep, measuring. Then old Mr. Murray, stick thumping against the flagstones, stood and nodded once. "Aye," he said, his voice like peat smoke. "We're with ye, Captain." A woman in a shawl, Mrs. Beattie, whose eaves had leaked through 2 winters, lifted her chin. "If ye mend the heart's roof first, I'll bring your folk broth till the wing's fit for work again." One by one the room loosened, heads bowed, then lifted. A few hands clapped, soft and awkward at first, then sure. Loyalty, not bought with ale or gossip, but offered in answer to honesty. At the back, Lachlan stood very still, the smile gone from his face. He looked suddenly smaller in the press of bodies. After the hall emptied, Lady Arabella stepped from the shadow of a pillar. She had watched the gathering in silence, gloves folded in one hand. Her composure was intact. Something in her gaze had altered. "You told me a ring could buy roofs," she said without preamble. Callum had no answer ready. He held her look. She tipped her head toward the hall. "It seems roofs can be raised with plainer materials, truth, and a man willing to be seen." She took a breath, the smallest softening at the corners of her mouth. "I came today prepared to insist on an announcement. It would have been correct, but correct, I think, has been misnamed." She slid one glove back on, finger by finger, and met his eyes squarely. "I release you, Captain Fraser. No understanding binds us. Be happy." The last word was almost a question, almost a blessing. He bowed, the respect real. "Thank you," he said, and meant it. When she had gone, the hall felt larger. The air moved easier through the old stones. He stood alone for a moment. The weight on his shoulders altered, not lighter exactly, but his to carry. In his pocket, the edge of a slate pressed against his palm. "Bring her back," Maisie had scratched, letters deep and crooked. He closed his hand around it, a promise sealing in his chest. It was time to make Dunbrae worthy of the woman who had taught it how to breathe, and then go and bring her home. Inverness was grey and busy. The family Elspeth served was kind, the work manageable, and still a part of her felt numb, as if she had left her heart in a dust-soft library miles away. She missed the hush of stacked books and the clean bite of lemon soap. She missed a pair of storm-grey eyes that had learned to see her. Quietly, she set a few volumes on a kitchen shelf and began a tiny lending corner for the other maids. It was a small echo of what she'd built at Dunbrae. A letter came from Reverend MacLeod. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. "My dear Elspeth," it began. "The tide has turned," the footman testified. "Duncan, Lachlan's man, has confessed to setting the fire under orders to discredit the captain. Lachlan has left Dunbrae under a cloud. The inquiry has cleared Callum entirely. The estate is his, free and clear. Tears blurred the neat lines. He was safe. Dunbrae was safe." She read on, breath-catching. "He has created a Dunbrae trust. He has sold silver, a strip of land, and his own horses to fund it. The tenants' roofs are being mended first. He has named a new post, mistress of the library and school. The terms require a knowledge of books, a gentle hand with children, and a steadfast heart. There is only one candidate the trust will consider." The letter slid to her lap just as wheels rattled into the courtyard. Not a grand lady's carriage, but a sturdy coach out of the north. The door swung open. A small figure tumbled down, then the ample, comforting shape of Cook Aggie. "Elspeth!" Maisie's face lit like morning. Elspeth ran, skirts in her fists, and dropped to her knees to catch the child's fierce, breathless hug. Aggie's voice was thick with feeling. "We've come to bring you home. The master, the house, it doesn't breathe right without you." The road home blurred past in a wash of green hills and Maisie's breathless chatter. When the coach turned into the Dunbrae drive, Elspeth saw the changes at once. The weeds were gone. The lopsided shutter on the west wing no longer clapped at the wind. From the scaffolded ruin came the thrum of hammers and the rasp of saws. Repair, not decay. He was waiting on the steps. Captain Fraser, Callum. He looked older, the lines at his eyes cut deeper, but the emptiness she'd once seen there had been replaced by a quiet, steady purpose. "Miss Grant," he said, voice low and formal. His eyes said everything else. "Captain," she returned, soft but sure. He did not lead her to a private parlour. He took her to the library. It was not the room she had left. The doors stood thrown wide. Villagers and tenants drifted in and out. Children sprawled on cushions, noses buried in books. A pair of crofters near the hearth argued amiably over a map. The space breathed, warm with murmurs, the rustle of paper, the steady tick of the pendulum clock. Callum stepped to the hearth and turned to the room, but his words were for her. "Dunbrae is not only stone and mortar," he said, voice carrying clear. "It is its people. Its heart is this room. Its soul is the learning and comfort we find here." He paused. "I was brought up to believe a laird must always do what is correct." A small smile, wry, almost tender, creased one corner of his mouth. His gaze found Elspeth's and held. "I will marry where this house breathes best," he said simply. "I will marry the woman who is its heart and its soul. If society will not call that correct, then it must learn another word." There was a hush, then a wash of sound, soft applause, low cheers, the bright, irrepressible clap of children's hands. Faces turned toward Elspeth with open smiles that needed no permission. He moved through the crowd to her, the press parting without ceremony. From his pocket he drew a folded, yellowed sheet and offered it with a care that felt like reverence. "My father never sent this," he said. "I found it in the desk." Elspeth unfolded the letter. The old laird's hand was precise and spare. "My dearest Callum, true courage is not found in the applause of the crowd, but in the quiet daily choice to build instead of break. It lies in protecting the vulnerable, in honouring your own heart, and in finding a love that steadies your breathing in the deepest dark." Her vision blurred. When she looked up, Reverend MacLeod had stepped forward, his kind, weathered face alight. "This is not a question of society," he said gently, "nor of correctness misnamed. Only this, do you love each other? And will you promise to love with patience, with kindness, and with a steadfastness strong enough to found this new Dunbrae?" Elspeth did not trust her voice. She held out her hand. Callum took it in both of his. Their linked hands were answer enough. Lachlan was gone, his reputation in tatters. The trust flourished, roofs were mended, the schoolroom became the busiest room in the house. They wed not in a grand kirk, but in the library, among books and the people they loved. No diamonds, no satin. Elspeth wore a simple gown of cream wool. Callum his regimentals, finally free of the weight that had once ridden his shoulders. Maisie, her stutter nearly vanished, scattered dried harebells in their path. The winter proved harsh, yet Dunbrae held warm. Snow shouldered high at the windows. Inside, the library fire burned steady. Elspeth's hush list hung framed beside the pendulum clock, a quiet promise in ink. Children's hands touched the spines along the shelves. Maisie's voice, sure and bright, carried across the room as she read aloud. One night Callum stirred from a deep, easy sleep, not a nightmare, only a turn in the wind. A gentle hand rested against his chest. "Breathe," Elspeth whispered in the dark. "Tick, tock." He followed her rhythm, breath slowing to meet hers. He turned and looked at her, his wife, her face softened by moonlight. He looked around their room, at the home they had built out of ash and stubborn love. "Home," he murmured. For the first time the word did not hurt, it soothed. He kissed her softly, a single tear of quiet joy catching on his lashes. Outside snow fell and sealed the world in white. Inside Dunbrae breathed, steady, content, at last without a whisper.
This was Bound by Duty, Torn by Love, written by Beryl Coops. I hope you enjoyed my short story. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. I have written over 500 short stories over the years under many pen names. I will be updating these and recording them under the Barrel Coops name. I will be listing them on YouTube as fast as we can get them recorded. They will include historical drama, humor, adventure, romance, period drama, mystery, thriller, war stories, spy stories, revenge, horror, psychological horror, dystopian, disaster, children's stories, love stories, and more. Too many to name. Something for everyone. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up. It helps others find my channel. Until next time, thank you for listening to the end.